Joining us now from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the Republican governor of that state and supporter of the Romney campaign, Governor Bobby Jindal. Good to have you on the show this morning.
And he's very excited because you know what? If you're from Louisiana,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out a fun place to go because New Orleans, Baton Rouge, it's such a boring state. Where do you go?
Pensacola.
You go to Utah.
Well, that's where he's going tonight.
Well, exactly.
Yes.
So you're going to go have some fun out in Utah, aren't you, Governor? What's going on out there?
Good morning. Well, thank you for having me. You know, they took our Jazz. The Jazz moved from Louisiana to Utah several years ago. We're going to go see what we can do about getting that name back. I am going to be going to Utah later tonight, be there for a couple of days with the Romney folks, talking to folks about creating jobs in the private sector. Thank you for having me back on the show this morning, guys.
It's great to have you back. And so what does Mitt Romney need to do to create jobs, to get us out of this economic funk that we're in?
You know, I think the governor has outlined a very detailed plan. I think he needs to remind voters this may be the most important election. I know politicians always say this, but this may be the most important election, certainly in our adult lifetimes. This election is not about who's the best speaker, not about who looks best on TV, who's the most charismatic guy. This election is about two very different views of America. You may remember last week, obviously, both candidates were in Ohio giving competing speeches on the economy. You heard two very different visions. It really is, do we go down a path of where Europe is, or do we go down the American path? President Obama talked about growing the public sector. Governor Romney is talking about growing the private sector. You really couldn't have two more different candidates. One's talking about President Obama's run up trillion-dollar-plus deficits, grown the federal government to 24% of the economy, has done stimulus after stimulus in an approach and an attempt to grow, again, federal spending. It hasn't worked. Governor Romney, on the other hand, is talking about energy policies that allow us to produce more energy at home. He's talking about repealing Obamacare. He's talking about cutting taxes, cutting spending. So I think the most important thing Governor Romney can do is make sure that voters understand this is not about personalities. It's not about speaking styles. It's about two very different visions for America.
John Meacham?
Governor, we've been talking some about the post-Citizens United world this morning. I'm just wondering how you're feeling about the state of our politics in terms of these independent expenditures. Are you happy with the world after that Supreme Court decision, or do you think that we still need some reform?
Well, look, a couple of things. You know, certainly I don't think any American's happy with all the barrage of tax ads and the things that fill the TV airwaves and come into our email boxes and fill our mailboxes. Look, politics has gotten more and more coarse. You see these incredibly vicious attacks, sometimes personal attacks. Look where we were 4 years ago. Back then, President Obama said that he would go through the publicly financed campaign system. Then when he realized he could outraise Senator McCain and set records, break records, decided not to do that. Now, 4 years later, the playing field's a little more level. I think President Obama will be able to raise upwards of $1 billion. I think Governor Romney will be able to be competitive to get his message out. I personally think that, you know, again, I think that free speech is a good thing in this country. I think it's a good thing people can get their ideas out. I think voters are smart enough to sort through all the nonsense. I think there are going to be a lot of distractions this campaign cycle. You've already heard some of the attacks. I mean, you've heard from the Obama side them talk about what Mitt Romney did in high school. You heard him talk about his dog. This election is not about any of that. I think the American voters are smart enough to sift through all that nonsense and realize this election is about two very different visions. Look, President Obama can't run on his record. 23 million unemployed, underemployed Americans. He said at the beginning of his term, if they didn't turn around the economy in 3 years, he'd be a one-term president. Promised to cut the deficit in half. We got trillion-dollar-plus deficits each year. Promised he would cut health care premiums $2,500 with Obamacare. That's not happening. His advisors said unemployment would be below 8% with the $800 billion stimulus bill. That's not happening. So he can't run on his record. Instead, he's going to have to attack Mitt Romney. He's going to have to attack Romney. But I think the voters will see through that.
Governor Jindal, Donnie Deutsch, as far as Obama's record, the one thing he does have, interestingly enough, a Pew poll the other day said 6 out of 10 Americans actually said they were better off today than 3 years ago. On top of that, I think the big issue he's got, Romney talked about the immigration yesterday, and clearly, as far as I'm concerned, it was kind of a non-speech. He's 30 points behind with the Hispanics, and some of the things he said earlier in the campaign about immigration, how does he ever recover from that? If both sides agree, the math on the Hispanics doesn't add up, and he's got to close that gap by 10 points, yet he's been on record as saying he's against the DREAM Act, very tough on immigration. How does he ever make up that difference for the Hispanic vote? And if he doesn't, he loses.
Well, two things. First of all, let's talk about the economy, whether we really are better off than we were 4 years ago. Over 500,000 more Americans are unemployed than the day the president took office. You look at median income, it's actually gone down under this president. You look at median family worth, 2-decade low. You look at mortgage owners, homeowners with mortgages, 30% of them are underwater. So you look at any objective economic indicators, we are not better off than we were 4 years ago. And I think if the voters go in the booth asking themselves that one question, am I better off than I was 4 years ago, I think Mitt Romney wins this election going away. In terms of immigration, look, you look at what the president has done with his executive order, clearly pandering, clearly treating the symptoms, not the root cause of our immigration challenges in this country. Nobody's arguing the status quo is acceptable. We clearly need to reform our laws. Mitt Romney has outlined some very specific principles. For example, talking about increasing the numbers for legal immigrants, especially those with the skills we need to grow our economy, removing the caps on countries where they hit those caps very quickly. He's talked about speeding up the processing of seasonal work visas, where in many years, those visas aren't even processed in time to make sense for workers that want to come here and employers that want to hire them. He's talked about reforming the green card and other systems to help unify families. He's talked about cracking down on coyotes, those that are smuggling folks across the border. Most importantly, he has said that we've got to secure the border. Yeah. Unfortunately, what the president's done, look, it may have been good politics, good political pandering, but he's treating the symptoms, not the root cause of the problems.
Governor John Meacham has a quick question.
Governor, quickly, and just I want to make sure I understood. Are you saying that we are not better off than we were 3 years ago? That the economy is not in a better place than we were when President Obama took office?
I'm saying if you look at all those statistics, absolutely we're not better off. We've got fewer Americans. We got more, 500,000 fewer jobs. We've got, again, income. You look at asset levels, they're going down. You look at government debt, it has gone up. The president's not outlined a vision or plan for getting us back on a path of growing our economy. He just continues to double down on a failed strategy. This is what was remarkable to me. Up until now, this president's been a very gifted speaker. He's been able to change the polls just by giving a great... He's been one of the best speakers in my adult lifetime watching politicians give speeches. The speech in Ohio, nearly an hour long, fell flat. It was the same old policies that haven't worked. He's basically, we went from hope and change to divide and blame. Now all of a sudden he's trying to run against President Bush. He's 8 years too late for that. He's offering the same old policies, and now he's trying to divide us based on class lines, on race lines, on gender lines, and any lines that will help him get reelected. So absolutely, I think the American people aren't better off.
Governor Bobby Jindal, thank you very much.
Have fun in Utah.
Good luck in Utah.